Mobilizing to defeat authoritarianism. Let's talk about it. It can be done. Yeah, so again, I want to give credit to Hardy Merriman. Another person you could look up if you want to find more information about this is Erica Chenoweth, who's written some public stuff about this topic specifically. I'm going to start with typical signs of authoritarianism, you know, where we are now, direct investigations against critics. We've seen that, yeah. Deploying the military domestically, happening. Giving license to law breaking, that's like pardoning the folks from January 6th. Regulatory retaliation, using the IRS to investigate critics. Federal law enforcement overreach, right? That's like the ICE agents wearing masks and no badges and brutalizing people. And of course, what we're concerned about is the autocrat won't leave, right? Like that's what we're facing. And I just want to ask, you know, what else have you seen, right? I'll just take a few signs of authoritarianism that you have seen. Yeah.
Shutdown. The media.
Censoring the media. Yeah, totally. The shutdown. Yeah, what's interesting about the shutdown, and this really matters in this context, in a democracy, the you know, the president or the people elected really care about the opinion of the population. But when you move toward authoritarianism, the opinion of the population matters a lot less, right? Because it's like, well, I'm not depending on those folks to vote me in anymore. And you can see that in the shutdown and other things happening. I just want to say, you know, at the beginning, sometimes it feels like the authoritarian is going after specific groups, right? Going after immigrants, going after trans folks, going after... But the truth is that authoritarianism hurts everybody. And we are already starting to see that. The other thing that I think is important to name is that our democracy was never perfect before, right? We know that. It was unevenly applied. You know, not everyone can use it in the same way, depending on your state, your identity, your situation, your amount of money, yep. But democracy allows us a field in which to fight those things and contest those things. And authoritarianism shuts that down. And the research shows that democracies have better indices in all of these ways. Better gender equality, better economic growth, better public health, better social safety net, better education system, specifically because we get to fight for those things. Less corruption. And it's really important to know that it's not too late, right? All is not lost. It's not over. There was a big set of research done about democracies from 1900 to 2023 around the world, looking at instances of democratic backsliding, which is what we're facing right now. And it doesn't happen very often, is really the truth. It's not that common. And in 50% of the cases where democratic backsliding is happening, it can be turned around. And it's hard to see 50% sometimes. Yeah. What really makes the difference is a people's movement, a resistance movement made of civil society fighting back against the authoritarian. It is not enough for us to wait for the judiciary or the political parties to support us. It has to be made up of civil society fighting back. And another statistic you might have seen is that in instances where 3.5% of the population is taking action against the authoritarian, that is when things can change. And that's not just showing up at a protest, that's actions that are about disobeying, right? That's about bigger actions, boycotts and strikes and things like that. And we'll get into that a little more. I also wrote the process can take some time because not only do we have to do an about face on the authoritarianism, we also have to change the conditions that put us here in the first place, right? And those conditions didn't cause our authoritarian in office, but they were the conditions that allowed him to take advantage of and become in that situation. So some of those conditions that are named by researchers are the way social media works has actually created a situation that the authoritarian is allowed to take advantage of, and the really, really unequal distribution of wealth in our country. The other thing is like underlying racial resentments, right? Because then the authoritarian is able to use those to gain power. So what will it take? What's it going to take? It's kind of helpful to think about this as a play. This has happened a lot of different places around the world, right? And we've got some players in our play. We've got our demagogue, our aspiring dictator, Trump, and his whole group of folks. And then we have team democracy, which is numbers 2 through 6. The federal civil servants, the judiciary, the state and local governments, opposition political parties, and civil society. And right from the beginning, you can see that team democracy begins fighting back right away, right? We've seen all of these groups starting to fight back. What's really important in this fight back is that we learn how to fight back together. We learn how to work as a team in a way that we never have before. That we really defend each other and create networks and communication in a way that we haven't. I put business community apart because many times at the beginning of a situation like this, the business community sees that it's more beneficial for them financially to side with the authoritarian. And we see that happening. And it is our job as team democracy to start to peel them off, to make it less beneficial. And you saw that happen. Now I'm just forgetting all the details, but you saw that happen over the Target. I was thinking specifically of the Disney and Jimmy Kimmel. Yes. Oh, yeah. And there's some really great statistics about this. So in the course of something like 3 days, something like 3 million people unsubscribed from Disney Plus, and that was, you know, millions of dollars for the company, and so that's what made them change their mind, right? That's a great example of people working together and fighting back and changing what was possible. So our job is to learn to play together and start to pick the business community off so that Trump doesn't have the support to do what he's doing. The strategies of the demagogue are also something we can predict and know what will happen. The demagogue is trying to divide and rule, trying to prevent us from playing together and working as a team, right? Finding ways to pick us off, one member at a time, through repression or co-optation, right? Like, I'll give you something, so work with me, or finding a way to make people so afraid that they can't work together. And many times an authoritarian will either avoid trigger events or combine trigger events with repression, harsh repression. So an example of a trigger event is actually deploying the troops to cities. That's a huge curtailment of rights, but you can tell that he's doing it because he wants he wants an excuse to crack down, right? He wants to go in, he wants someone to throw a bottle, and then he can use violence and say, look, it was justified. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. I feel like it's really helpful to see this stuff because you're like, oh, how validating. Like, we are living through this. The demagogue is also trying to spread fear and intimidate team democracy with their offense. So basically, they would like us all to not try things, to censor ourselves because we're afraid, to not go out and do things, right? Like that, get compliance through our fear. The demagogue always has the upper hand on the offense, but can't play defense as well. That means when we start to fight back, it's much harder for the authoritarian than when we're not fighting back. And so the goal is to get us all so afraid that we don't work together, that we don't talk to each other, that we're not fighting back. And they're trying to sow confusion and distract. I mean, you see this. That's what flood the zone is, right? They have their own word for it. And to provoke violence from us, because that's an excuse. If we use violence, that's an excuse for them to crack down even more. So it is actually important that we think together about our strategies, and nonviolence is a really good tactic against an authoritarian for this reason. And our goals as team democracy are to slow it down, right? We've started that already. That's every fight that we have, we're trying to slow down his moves toward taking more power, taking our rights away. That's like the example of Jimmy Kimmel. That example both slowed him down and taught us how to work together And so we're trying to build our power and our muscles to be in coordination, working together against him. We're trying to stop it. We're trying to prepare for different scenarios. What happens in November next year if Democrats win a bunch of elections around the country? Are we ready if the Republicans decide not to seat Democrats? Right? We have to start thinking ahead to say, what are we going to do? What are the ways we are going to resist if they say, no, we're not going to seat any Democrats? And we also need to prepare scenarios for 2028, right? What's going to happen then? And then our job, once we reverse it, is to build better, right? We need to tax the wealthy. We need to change the conditions that put us here in the first place. It's really important for us to think about tactics as we're doing this. So traditionally, in fights for justice, there's a lot of tactics that are institutional. We have to use electoral politics and the legal system, which is all being used now, and traditional advocacy efforts. We have to continue to do those things, and in a moment of authoritarianism, they are not enough. It is not enough. We also need labor organizing. We need folks fighting for rights in their workplace and standing up. We need protests of all kinds, from no kings to what happens on the bridge to resistance. And we need boycotts, like what happened at Target, like what happened with Disney. We need strikes. You know, we need to prepare for how are we going to really, what happens in 2028? What is our moment, and what are we going to do to disrupt what's happening? There was something I was going to say here. There's been a little bit of a narrative that there's not resistance since Trump was elected the second time, which is just really not true, right? The first No Kings protest had 5 million participants, and the second that just happened had 7 million around the country. That's still not quite at the 3.5%. The 7 million is actually 2% of the population. And so we have somewhere to go, right? We've got more to do. And what's really great about those spaces is it's a place for people to feel like we're connected. There's many of us. We don't agree with this, right? And so we need that, and we need more. We need to keep exercising those muscles of being able to work together and trying new things. So many times when you look at this kind of research, there's so many examples, and recent examples, of people turning back authoritarian slides from around the world. A recent example in 2023 in Guatemala, there was an election. The president who was in office refused to accept the results of the election, and indigenous movements from around the country basically took the capital. They came to the capital and occupied the capital for 3 weeks until the president stepped down, right? So exactly. People can figure this out. In South Korea, as recent as 2024, this also happened. So the president declared martial law, and the unions, which have about the same percentage of unions in this country, around 12%, had been already watching the president and what he'd been doing. They'd been fighting back. When he declared martial law, they were like, no, we will declare a general strike unless you step down. And there were many, many steps in this process, including public meetings where they were talking about what they were doing, and eventually they declared they started enacting a strike, and eventually the president stepped down. So this, again, we can do this, right? And people have done this. I'll just say a little bit about messaging, because we are in a time of extreme polarization, and people talk about that all the time. And really, Trump uses that. He takes advantage of that. He's an expert at dividing us. Urban versus rural, which in part is the militarization, right? Democrat versus Republican, people of color versus white people. And, you know, it would be nice to say, let's turn the temperature down, let's stop polarization. But that, you know, like Obama did, but that doesn't feel that great for folks who are under attack, right? It's like, what do you mean, turn the temperature down? Like my life is being threatened. Instead, we have an opportunity to repolarize, which is to say, this is not a city versus rural thing. This is a rich versus poor thing. This is a billionaires versus the rest of us thing, right? The key problem is that the authoritarians' power is for the wealthy, and we need to fight back against that. So I want to close by sharing a little story. I didn't share much about my work during this talk. I organized with renters. We organized tenant unions. And at the beginning of our work 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of examples. There were no organizations in Minneapolis that were organizing renters in that way. And people said, like, that's not an organizable population. And our members, the majority of our members were immigrants from mostly, Latin American countries who were sort of new to the country and really scared, right? It was hard to ask for their rights because they were like, who's going to respect us? Even going to court was scary because of fear that immigration would show up and deport people. And it felt many times, we didn't know. We didn't know what we could win. We didn't know what we could do. And it felt many times like we were inviting our groups to just like hold hands and jump off this cliff together, We'll see what we find at the bottom. And every time we found a better world, every single time, we found not just improved conditions in people's homes with, exterminations of the cockroaches that were living there and the immense mice and rat problems. But we also found a change in us, right? Like a belief that like we can do something together, we can do this together. And I feel that a little bit now. Like we are again across our whole society in a place where we don't know what's next. But I feel confident that if we can work together, if we can hold hands to jump off that cliff, there will be something better on the other side, if we can figure out how to really work together. And so I want to invite you to that, right? Like that is the invitation today. And this doesn't have to be, I know you live in a different context than me, but there's so many things that can be done, right? The social safety net is being eroded, and so you all participating and supporting people in this community who don't have anything to eat is part of this work, right? Providing the networks that the government is not is part of this work. Showing up at the bridge is part of this work. Being in community in a different way and reaching across difference and learning to work together is this work. And when the call comes to participate in something bigger, then you have the network and the way to stand up together, right? And so we are lifting weights together. We are learning how to be a community in a different way now so that we're ready to fight back.